The cool night air clung to the forest as Eli and Derren walked side by side, their boots crunching against the underbrush. The moon hung low, casting silvery light on the narrow trail ahead of them. Their mission was supposed to be straightforward. A recon of an old outpost rumoured to house artifacts tied to Black Dawn's recent movements. But, with Echo Division, nothing ever stayed simple. Eli adjusted the strap on her satchel, scanning the area with eyes that gleamed in the moonlight. Her pointed ears twitched, as they always did when she was deep in thought. Derren followed closely behind, shotgun slung over his shoulder, his usual sarcastic grin noticeably absent tonight. After hours of banter-filled days and fast-paced missions, something felt different. Derren's usual cockiness was subdued, and Eli could feel the tension between them, unspoken but lingering like a weight they both carried. It had been a few days since the pack's training exercise, and since then she had noticed him pulling back, as though the surreal nature of their world was starting to chip away at his bravado. "You're quiet tonight," Eli said, her voice breaking the silence as they maneuvered around a fallen log. Derren gave a half-hearted chuckle. "Yeah, well, nothing much to say." "You? No snarky remarks? No witty comebacks?" Eli smirked. "You sure you're all right?" Derren didn't respond right away. Instead, he kept his gaze focused on the trail ahead, his brow furrowed in thought. Eli glanced at him sideways, waiting for the joke that never came. After another few moments, she stopped walking, her boots planted firmly on the ground. "Okay, spill it," she said, crossing her arms and looking at him directly. "I know you well enough to know when something's eating at you." Derren sighed, stopping a few feet ahead of her. He ran a hand through his hair and turned to face her, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen. All right. You caught me, Keebler." Eli rolled her eyes at the nickname but stayed silent, letting him gather his thoughts. Derren began, his voice quieter now. "I don't know if I really believe all of this." Eli blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean? You've seen everything we've seen. The demons, the portals, the wolves. Hell, you fought a freaking dragon with us." "Yeah, I did," Derren muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "And maybe that's the problem." Eli's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Derren's gaze fell to the ground, his boots scuffing against the dirt. "Look, when I signed up to join Gunner, I thought I'd be working on fixing jets, taking care of a few mechanical issues. You know, normal stuff. I didn't expect this." He gestured to the forest around them, the eerie silence of the night, the shadows lurking just beyond the tree line. Demons? Elves? Wolves that are practically supernatural? It's like I'm living in some kind of twisted fairy tale. Eli's gaze softened as she listened, her arms dropping to her sides. "You don't think it's real?" "I mean, I see it. I feel it," Derren said quickly, almost defensively. "I fought that dragon, for crying out loud. But some part of me, some part deep down, keeps thinking I'm going to wake up and be back in some desert in Kuwait, or that I've gone completely off the deep end. Maybe I'm still in the army, and this is some messed up dream from a bad batch of rations." Eli's face softened as she took a step closer, her voice gentle. "Derren, you're not dreaming." "I know that," he said, but his voice cracked with uncertainty. "But you've got to understand, Eli. For me, this isn't just a jump into a new mission. It's everything I never believed in. Everything I was taught to think was impossible. I've always been a guy who trusted what I could see, what I could touch. But this is way beyond that." Eli stood silently for a moment, letting his words sink in. Derren's skepticism, despite the world they lived in now, wasn't something she hadn't considered. He had grown up in a world with clear rules, where the supernatural was just a myth or a bedtime story. And now, that same world had flipped on its head, and he was still adjusting. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I get it, Derren. I do. I know what it's like to question everything you thought you knew. Hell, when I first found out what I was, what I could do, I wanted to run from it, pretend it wasn't happening. but I had to accept it, just like you will. Derren looked at her, his eyes searching hers for some kind of anchor. How? How did you accept it? Eli shrugged, her gaze drifting toward the dark woods ahead of them. I didn't have a choice. None of us do, really. You either face the reality of what this world is, or you get swallowed up by it. Derren let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Yeah, I guess you're right. Doesn't make it any easier, though. No, Eli agreed, her voice soft. It doesn't, but you're not alone in this. You've got us. Gunnar, Clara, the whole pack. You're part of this world now, Derren, and whether you believe it or not, you're one of the good guys. Derren chuckled softly, the tension in his voice easing a bit. Thanks, Keebler. You've got a way of making sense of all this. Eli smirked. I try. They continued down the path, the silence between them no longer heavy but comfortable, a quiet understanding forming between them. As they neared the outpost, Derren finally broke the silence again, his voice lighter this time. You know, part of me is starting to think that maybe this whole supernatural gig isn't so bad. At least I get to blow things up. Eli laughed, shaking her head. There it is, the Derren I know. And hey, he added with a grin, if I'm going to be stuck in some twisted reality with demons and dragons, at least I've got the best damn shotgun in the universe. Eli rolled her eyes but smiled. Just try not to blow yourself up this time, okay? No promises, Derren said, winking as they reached the edge of the clearing where the outpost lay hidden in the shadows. And with that, they prepared to face whatever waited for them in the darkness, together as part of the Echo Division. The dense forest opened up to a clearing as Eli and Derren approached the crumbling structure of the outpost. It looked like a ghost of its former self, abandoned, with vines creeping up the stone walls and the roof half collapsed. The air was still, eerily quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Derren looked around, shotgun in hand, his expression unreadable. Doesn't look like much, he muttered. You sure this is the place? Eli didn't answer right away. She crouched down near the entrance, her eyes scanning the ground, her ears alert to even the slightest movement. It's the place, she said softly, running her fingers through the dirt, feeling the residual energy in the earth. Derren stood guard, his gaze darting around the perimeter. He was still on edge after their earlier conversation, but now, in the face of potential danger, his military instincts kicked in. If this is their base, where the hell are they? Eli rose to her feet and dusted off her hands. That's what we're going to find out. The two made their way inside the outpost, the air growing cooler as they stepped into the darkened interior. The place was a wreck, broken furniture scattered across the floor, old documents shredded and crumpled in the corners. Derren's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing the remnants of a hastily abandoned base. The walls were lined with outdated tech and decaying symbols that hinted at Black Dawn's former presence. Derren let out a low whistle as they moved deeper inside. Looks like someone left in a hurry. Maybe the rumors about Black Dawn being stronger than ever are just that. Rumors. Eli didn't respond, her focus shifting as her sharp eyes scanned the area. Something didn't feel right. Stay close, she said, her voice low. There's more to this place than what we're seeing. They continued through the building, finding room after room filled with little more than dust and broken equipment. It was as if Black Dawn had abandoned this place long ago, yet there was something about it that felt too deliberate, like they wanted to leave no trace behind. This is a waste of time, Derren grumbled, tapping his foot impatiently. Whatever Black Dawn was up to here, they're long gone. We should head back and report. Not yet, Eli said, her voice firm. There's something hidden here. I can feel it. Derren raised an eyebrow. You're telling me you feel it? Like magic elf feelings kind of thing? Eli ignored his teasing and knelt down in the center of the room, her hand hovering just above the floor. She closed her eyes and concentrated, feeling the faint traces of magic that still lingered in the space. Her fingers brushed lightly over the ground, and suddenly she felt it. An anomaly. Something out of place. There, she whispered, her eyes snapping open. She pressed her hand against the floor, and a soft hum filled the air. Slowly, a hidden trapdoor revealed itself, the outlines of ancient runes glowing faintly beneath the dust. Derren stepped forward, clearly impressed. Well, damn, you're full of surprises, Keebler. Eli shot him a quick smirk before focusing on the runes. These are old. Very old. Whoever placed these didn't want anyone finding this. She began working on the runes, tracing them carefully with her fingers and muttering a quiet incantation under her breath. The runes flickered, and the trapdoor slowly creaked open, revealing a hidden chamber below. Derren aimed his flashlight down the dark stairway, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. Well, looks like we found something after all. They descended into the chamber, the air growing colder as they moved deeper underground. The chamber was small but lined with walls covered in strange, ancient symbols. At the far end, a set of cabinets and a work table stood covered in layers of dust, as if they hadn't been touched in years. Eli approached the work table, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the documents scattered across it. These aren't just old records, she murmured, picking up one of the faded pieces of parchment. This is intel. Recent, too. Derren leaned in to take a look, his expression skeptical. Intel on what? Eli's fingers moved quickly over the papers, her eyes widening as she pieced together the information. Black Dawn. They're not as strong as we thought. They've been losing numbers ever since we destroyed the Demon King. Derren's eyebrows shot up. Wait, you're telling me that without the big bad demon they're falling apart? Eli nodded, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. It gets worse. Look here. She pointed to a specific set of notes, hastily written in what looked like a panicked hand. They're trying to find someone named Trinity. Trinity the Phantom, Derren said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I've heard of her. She's supposed to be one of the deadliest operatives Black Dawn ever had, but I thought she disappeared years ago. Eli frowned, studying the notes more closely. She did disappear, but these documents say she's been locked up somewhere, hidden away. Black Dawn is scrambling to find her. With the Demon King gone and their leadership shattered, she's their last hope to rebuild. Derren let out a low breath, absorbing the gravity of the situation. So, what we thought was a growing threat is actually a desperate scramble. Eli nodded, her expression grim. Exactly. They're weaker than we realized. But if they find Trinity, that could change. Derren straightened, his grip tightening on his shotgun. Then we can't let them find her. No, Eli agreed. We need to get this information back to Gunnar and the others. If we know where Black Dawn's weaknesses are, we can stop them before they recover. As they gathered up the documents, Derren paused, glancing over at Eli. You were right, by the way, about trusting my instincts and all that. Looks like there's a lot more going on than I wanted to believe. Eli gave him a small smile. You're starting to catch on. Derren chuckled. Yeah. Don't get too full of yourself. With the documents safely secured, the two made their way back up the stairwell and out of the abandoned outpost. As they stepped into the night air, Derren's face grew serious again. If they find Trinity, he muttered, things could get bad. Real bad. Eli nodded. That's why we won't let them. Together they set off through the forest, determined to get back to Echo Division and share what they had discovered. The road ahead was uncertain, but with this new information, they had the chance to strike at Black Dawn before they could recover. And for the first time in a long time, the pack had the upper hand. The workshop was quiet, but there was a palpable tension in the air as Eli and Derren stood before Gunnar. The mission had been successful, but the information they uncovered about Black Dawn, and particularly Trinity, was more than either of them had expected. Gunnar, seated at the head of the table, was flipping through the documents Eli handed over, his face growing darker with each page. Eli spoke carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. We found evidence that Black Dawn is much weaker than we thought. Without the Demon King and with you dismantling their core leadership, they're falling apart. But they're still trying to locate someone, Trinity. Apparently, she's their key to rising again. At the mention of Trinity, Gunnar froze, his fingers tightening around the edge of the document. His face became stone, unreadable, but the tension in his body was unmistakable. Eli exchanged a quick glance with Derren, knowing something heavy lay behind the name. "You know something about her, don't you?" Eli ventured, her voice soft but steady. "Who is Trinity?" Gunnar set the papers down, his one good eye dark and full of unspoken turmoil. For a moment, it seemed like he wouldn't answer at all, but then, in a low, almost resigned voice, he spoke. "Trinity wasn't just an agent," Gunnar began. "She was my assistant, my second-in-command in the agency. We fought side by side for years." His voice grew harder as memories resurfaced. "I trusted her with everything. She was like a shadow of me, my confidant." Derren crossed his arms, always the blunt one. "So, what happened? How does she fit into Black Dawn?" Gunnar's expression shifted, guilt and anger flashing across his features. "Trinity. She betrayed us. She wasn't just part of Black Dawn, she formed it. She was the Phantom, their leader. And none of us, saw it coming." Eli's eyes widened. "She's the Phantom? The one behind Black Dawn this whole time?" Gunnar nodded grimly, the bitterness in his voice palpable. "Yeah. The whole time she was by my side, she was building Black Dawn in the shadows. I didn't realize it until it was too late. The ambush, the one that nearly destroyed the agency, it was her doing. She coordinated the attack to take us down from the inside." He paused, the weight of his words settling in the air. "We were surrounded. I was trapped, along with a handful of agents, and it looked like there was no way out. That's when Trinity sacrificed herself. Or at least, that's what I thought." Eli leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "But it wasn't a sacrifice, was it?" Gunnar's jaw clenched. "No, it was a trick. A final act to make me think she'd given everything to save us. I believed she had died, bought us time to escape. But I was wrong." Derren looked baffled. "So, she faked her death to save you, but she was the one who set it all up?" Gunnar's voice grew harder, a dark edge to his tone. "Exactly. When I found out the truth, when I realized that she had orchestrated everything, that she was the Phantom, it almost broke me. She was responsible for the deaths of so many of my people, people I trusted, and all the while she played her part perfectly." Eli shook her head, trying to process the betrayal. "So, what happened next? How did Sofia find her?" Gunnar let out a slow breath, his shoulders slumping ever so slightly. "After the agency fell, we thought Black Dawn was gone. But Sofia, she kept digging. She was the one who eventually tracked down Trinity, or rather the Phantom. She figured it out, uncovered the truth about who Trinity really was." He paused, his voice tightening. "Sofia brought her to justice, at least as much justice as you can get for someone like her. Trinity was captured, tried, and locked away in a top-secret prison for supernatural threats. And that's where she is now, under constant surveillance." Derren whistled softly. "So Sofia took down your old partner, the leader of Black Dawn. That's heavy." Gunnar's face was hard, distant. "She did, and she's the only reason Trinity isn't out there right now, rebuilding Black Dawn from the ashes." Eli absorbed the weight of Gunnar's words. "And now, Black Dawn is trying to find her. They think if they can get her back, they can regain their strength." "Exactly," Gunnar said, his voice low. "But as long as I'm around, that won't happen. No one knows where she is, not anymore. I made sure of that. Only I know the location of that prison." There was a long pause as the implications of Gunnar's revelations sank in. Trinity, the Phantom, the very heart of Black Dawn, was still alive. Locked away, but very much a threat if she ever escaped. Before Eli could ask anything more, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Sofia entered the room, her expression both relieved and conflicted. Gunnar's gaze softened slightly at the sight of her, but he could tell something was on her mind. "Sofia," he greeted her, standing a little straighter. "What's going on?" Sofia hesitated, then spoke. "I've been offered a new position. Homeland Security wants me to head up a division for supernatural threats, a director-level position. It's a huge responsibility, and I'm not sure if I should take it." Derren raised an eyebrow. "Director of supernatural threats? Well, that's new." Sofia smiled faintly but quickly grew serious again. "I wanted to talk to you, Gunnar, before I make my decision. I'm worried about drawing too much attention to us, to Echo Division. We've worked hard to stay off the radar, and I don't want to compromise that." Gunnar crossed his arms, studying her. "You've already made up your mind, haven't you?" Sofia sighed, nodding slightly. "I'm leaning toward accepting the job, but I wanted to hear your thoughts first." Gunnar's expression softened as he approached her. "You're the best person for that job, Sofia. You've already done more for this world than most people will ever know. You'd be a huge asset to Homeland Security and to the fight against supernatural threats." "But what about Echo Division?" Sofia asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I don't want to expose what we've built here." Gunnar's tone turned serious. "Echo Division stays in the shadows. That's non-negotiable. But you, in that position, you can help make sure that when the world finally learns about what's out there, they're ready. You can keep the balance between the human world and everything else." Sofia's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the concern didn't fully leave her eyes. "So you think I should do it?" "I think you'd be perfect for it," Gunnar said, his voice firm. "But I need you to promise me one thing." Sofia nodded, waiting. "Keep Echo Division a secret," Gunnar said, his tone unwavering. "No one can know about us, not Homeland Security, not anyone. What we do here stays off the radar." Sofia smiled softly. "You have my word." With that, the weight of the conversation seemed to lighten. Sofia had found her path forward and Gunnar had made peace with it. But even as they prepared for the future, the shadow of Trinity, the phantom, still loomed large. Black Dawn wasn't gone yet, and neither was the threat she posed. As Sofia left the room, Eli turned back to Gunnar, her voice quiet but resolute. "We'll be ready if Black Dawn comes looking for her." Gunnar's gaze hardened. "We'd better be."
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.